Okay, evening all. Welcome. Our last talk, we've got Jamie and Matty, who are going to describe their jobs and basically why they love flying and how they got into aviation, what their jobs are like, and doing a bit of gliding as well. So rather than me ramble on, I'll pass you across to the both of them, and they can tell you how. Well, I've never worked for a living, and I think they're in the same category. It beats working, it beats working for a living. You're getting paid to do what you want to do. So you take it away.
Great. Thanks very much, Sam. I've just seen that Brian Scoogle's here as well, so I'm going to have to be on the money with facts and figures here. I won't get let away with anything wrong. But yeah, well, for those of you that don't know us, I'm Jamie. I've been at Portmoak now for probably on and off about 8 years, and I've worked for Easyjet for the same length of time, 5 of which has been as a first officer on the Airbus. I started flying when I was 18. I went to Florida to get my PPL. My first job in life school was in McDonald's. Never been to university, so it's very much the self-improver route, which will I think Sant and Brian both did, where you start off and work your way up to the glorified position of the right-hand seat. I'll let Matthew introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm Matty. I'm a member of Portmoak as well. I've been there probably about 3 years now. Bronze pilot on the gliders and I fly the tug planes as well. I'm pretty much the same. I did the self-improver route. So I initially took a trial flight when I was 12. Started learning when I was 14 towards my PPL. Got that, started working as cabin crew, and now I fly the Saab 340, which is the aircraft on the right for Logan Air.
So what I think we thought we would do to start with is just to give you a bit of an overview. Matty's going to sort of tell you what it takes to get to the license that you need to fly for an airline. I know this has probably changed a little bit since Sant and Brian had done it. There's a few more hoops to jump through, but we'll take it up to there, and then what happens when you get into an airline in terms of the training for that. And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about Easyjet and Logan Air, because whilst it is essentially the same job on paper we do, it's a very, very different operation. One, an Easyjet is more about management, whereas Logan Air is a lot more about the actual hand flying of the airplane, rather than managing a computer. So I'll pass off to Matty and I'll let him yak on a little bit about what needs to become, or what you need to become a commercial pilot.
Brill. So yeah, effectively there's two main ways how you can do it. There's the integrated route and the self-improver or modular route. So it basically both gets you the same license at the end. The integrated is, as it says in the tin, all in one. So that would be like the likes of Oxford at L3, where you go away, pay normally a hell of a lot more money for it, and get your frozen ATPL at the end. The other route, which is the route both myself and Jamie have gone down, was the modular route. So that's basically, as it says, you're divided up into small sections. You work through, do your PPL, night rating, hour building, and then you move on to your commercial license, multi-engine rating, and then your instrument rating as well. Run through all that, get your MCC jock at the end, which lets you, gives you an introduction at the jet world, and then start applying for licenses. So yeah, the main difference really between the two of them, just the integrated, you just get that final license. You don't normally get the PPL from it. It just sort of works through. And the modular route, because you can sort of shop around and go to smaller schools as well, you can normally keep the costs quite low. So a lot of sort of the overseas operators like Hungary and places like that, you can tend to keep the costs quite low. Yeah.
Excellent. So I think up for all the training that Matty's talking about here, up into that MCC jock area, it's all fairly similar to what you'd be used to, because it's all what we call single pilot. But the big change occurs here because you change from flying on your own to flying with somebody else, which is really difficult, actually, but a lot more difficult than it sounds when you first start doing it, because you get so used to just doing things for yourself rather than having to ask someone for them or try and work as a team to solve the problem. But once you've got to that position and you've applied for what seems like hundreds of jobs and you finally get a call back from an airline, then we would go on to start what's called the type rating, which is where you narrow down to the specific airline and aircraft type that you're going to fly. And that will be the first time you end up in one of these torture chambers, which is a full flight simulator. This is Easyjet's Academy down in Gatwick. There's 3 simulators you can see. There's another 2 behind us there, and we've got 2 of those sim centres, so you can see the capacity that we are throwing through there. What happens there is you do about a month and a half of ground school, which is learning everything and anything about the aeroplane. And it's then about another month of simulator training. And it's about between 10 and 15 simulator sessions, depending on the pilot and the aeroplane that you need to do. And then the final bit of training before you get let loose with passengers is probably, I'm fairly sure Sant and Brian would agree with me here, is probably, and Matthew, the best day of a pilot's life, which is your base training. And that is when you get an empty airliner and you and 10 of your mates you've been on your kite rating course do fill it up with fuel, and you take it away and you do some circuits in it. So it's a pretty memorable day for everybody. I've actually got a video here, the next slide, which is what it looks like from the cockpit to do a touch and go in the Airbus. This was my base training down in a place called Châteauroux in France. So you can tell me if the video works. Hopefully it'll play. There we go. Chap in the left-hand seat used to be Red Arrow #1, Tony Smith. Very, very relaxed guy. And you can see there we're bumping off the ground and going straight back off for 6 minimum circuits. It's quite unusual as well, because normally at this point we'd obviously pull the reverse thrust out, but you see there he puts the thrust levers up to spool the engines again, and he pulls the flaps up. So we just keep the airplane rolling around the runway, and as soon as the flaps have stopped, back to full power. And because the airplane's so light, there's only 10 or 15 of us on, you see how quickly we rotate straight back into the air. And every single pilot that's ever started at Easyjet, especially the cadets, will get to do 6 of those as a minimum. And just to do the 6 circuits, you're talking around about 2.5 to 3 tons of fuel. So you can see how quickly the cost of that mounts up. That's about a £10,000 day out if you're paying for it on your own. So you can really see how a lot of that £135,000 is spent very, very quickly. So that's how you get to this position. So what we thought now is I'll hand it back to Matthew, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about Logan Air and what he does, because as far as flying does, a lot of the similarities end there. And we now break off into the 2 very different operations that we do. So I'll hand you back to Matthew.
So yes, so Logan Air is obviously Scotland's airline. We have quite a varied operation really with us. We operate quite a number of types of aircraft. So as I said, I'm on the Saab 340 at the minute, which has slowly been phased out for the ATR. So we predominantly do mostly the shorter routes around Scotland. We do have the Embraer as well, which is the jet that tends to go to the more far-flung places. Probably most of you as well know Keith Buchan that flies at the club. He's actually on the Embraer, so he also flies for Logan Air. We also then have the Twin Otter, which is one of the government-funded aircraft. That goes backwards and forwards between some of the smaller, more remote places such as Barra, which is the beach landing one that we do, and Tyree and Campbelltown, which aren't on the map. And then we also have the Islander, which is up in the Orkneys, and that flies backwards and forwards between all the islands up in the Orkneys, just delivering everyone back into Kirkwall. So this is focusing just on the Saab 340 operation at the minute, and sort of shows some of the routes that we do predominantly out of Scotland. So we've got a few main bases, namely Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, and Inverness and Aberdeen. And from there, we tend to serve most of the Highlands and the islands. So the red is our passenger routes, and blue is cargo. Some of those we have just recently picked up, which is covering a lot of the COVID stuff. So all the stuff to like Belfast and Stansted, that's quite unusual for us. We don't normally do that, but we stepped in just to fill some of that at the minute, which is predominantly what we tend to be doing now. And the red is the this sort of staple stuff, which we haven't been doing an awful lot of recently, just with all the restrictions. So that gives you a kind of rough idea of some of the routes that we do and whatnot. So then moving on to the aircraft in particular, the Saab 340. A couple of stats there for you. So we are a hell of a lot smaller than Easyjet. It's just a little 34-seater with a maximum takeoff weight of about 13 tons, just over. As I say, we pretty much just go into the small the islands and stuff. So we don't tend to get massive amounts of passengers. That's just sort of feeding back into the main places. A couple of technical facts then. Max cruise speed for us, we're an awful lot slower than the big jets. We'll typically cruise around at about 240, 245 knots indicated, which normally maximum it tends to give us is about 300 knots true airspeed. So a hell of a lot slower than the big jets. The big advantage though with us is we don't have the restriction on like energy management that the big jets will. So we can keep that speed till a lot later before we have to like configure for landing, which helps us out for slotting in and sequencing. Maximum ceiling in the aircraft is about 25,000 feet. However, normally we never really get up that high. Typically high for us is about 16,000, but often on good weather days we'll drop down a hell of a lot lower than that. And fuel burn as well, that's probably a drop in the ocean for Jamie on the Airbus. We typically burn roughly about 550 kilos an hour. So not as much fuel as what the big planes do. So yeah, that's a couple of those points. And then just on the height, I'll flip on the next slide there. This is just to sort of give you an example, which is slightly different from the norm, probably for Easyjet as well. This is actually up in the Orkneys, coming into Kirkwall, the Old Man of Hoy. So often when it's good weather days such as that, we'll actually drop right down low and just more do a bit of sightseeing. The company are really keen on us doing this if the weather conditions are all right. So we often do that just as a nice little extra touch for the passengers. And just stay down low. We often go VFR as well, if we can. So if it's just short hops, short sectors, we'll cancel our IFR and just stay visual, just flying out the window if we can, which is just a nice little touch. It's really sort of unusual. Most companies don't do that. Typically, most companies might only let you do sort of visual approaches. But we very routinely do sort of the whole flight visually if we can get away with that. So yeah, hand back over to Jamie and go through your stuff.
Yeah, so for the big orange machine, which as you can see from what Matthew's saying, Logan Air's a small, almost local company that everybody knows everybody, and we move on to Easyjet. We are now the largest airline in the UK by passenger numbers carried. We fly 980 routes in 155 different airports in 35 countries. We've got bases all over Europe. We're a massive operation at the moment. As we speak, we've got 320 aircraft, although that is getting played around at the moment. And I'm sure most of you know from airline and all the programs, we're a low-cost airline, so the emphasis really is on getting that cost per passenger seat down. So it's always fast turnarounds, and I'm sure I have to tell Brian this, but very long days out. So it's not uncommon for us to do 10, 12-hour days with 4 sectors all across Europe. So we could maybe go from Edinburgh to Paris and Munich in a day, or to Geneva and Reykjavik, or, for example, to somewhere like Paphos in Cyprus, which is 2,240 miles away. It's 100 miles further away than St. John's in Canada. Turn around and come straight back. So it's a very, very different operation there. And in terms of our turnarounds, when we get on the ground, our standard turn is between 30 and 35 minutes, but sometimes it's as little as 25 minutes to get all of the passengers off, cabin cleaned, aircraft refueled, reboarded, close the doors and get off. So it's a very fast-paced operation that we run. Bonuses to that, one, you get to fly some nice shiny new jets. We're getting new airplanes all the time. I'll talk a bit more about those in a second. And two, the main thing for me that I quite like is the variety. I mean, for example, one day I can be down in Dubrovnik in clear blue skies, nil winds on a shiny new A320neo. And the very next day, these pictures were taken a day apart, or the next one was a video. I can be up in Keflavik in Iceland and blowing snow coming across the runway at night. So you can see that the appeal there is that it doesn't get boring for the most part. You can have very different challenges on very different days. One day you can be worrying about, is the temperature going to be too warm that we can't switch the APU off and boil the passengers, and the next day you can be de-icing. So it makes it quite interesting from that point of view. As mentioned, we fly the Airbus family of airplanes. So we've got the A319, which is the smaller variant in the fleet. We've got the A320, and now we've got A321 Neos in the fleet. So pretty interesting. Well, not interesting, but it's pretty nice because you can be on a very different set of weights for the airplane. We can vary by 40 tons in maximum takeoff weight, which makes the thing fly quite differently. Quick stats there, won't bore you with them, but 39,000 feet's our service ceiling, so we're pretty high up compared to the Saab. It's not as much nice views. And the fleet goes from the A319 with 156 passengers up to the 321 Neos, which can somehow get 235 passengers squeezed into them. I'm sure you'll work out how when you sit in one. And you'll see there, I've also put on the 320, we've got the CEO and the Neo variants, which, just to explain what those are, the CEO is the original engine, the CFM56 that they fitted to the airplane. And the Neo is these new fuel-efficient engines, which they're called geared turbofans, so that they're a lot bigger and a lot quieter, but they save us, along with a couple of other tweaks, about 15% on our fuel burn, which for EasyJet is a big thumbs up. They like to save on that. They're always encouraging us to take as little as possible. Onto the flight deck of the Airbus, you see it's a highly computerized airplane, and I think that's where the main difference comes in between flying a jet like this versus a turboprop. That the skill isn't really in flying the airplane, because the autopilot can do quite a lot of that. And you can see here we've got side sticks for manually flying, but most of the time with the autopilot engaged, you fly it through this series of knobs up here, and through these computers down here, the FMGCs. So we actually don't really need to fly the airplane by hand an awful lot if we don't want to. Obviously that's the fun in it, but some people often forget that. The challenge is in managing the airplane, because whilst the Airbus is a very easy airplane to fly when everything's going okay, when we start to get failures, because everything on the airplane talks to everything else, the way they interact can start to really build up. And there's some very complex and long checklists in there that you don't have to memorize, but you need to have quite a good working knowledge of the systems on board the aircraft. So our electrical system, hydraulic system are probably the two that can cause you most aggravation if they don't work properly. So that's what I mean when I say it's more of a management challenge than it is a flying challenge on the normal day out. The engines I was telling you about, the CEO and the Neo engines. So this is the on the left hand side, this is the CEO engine. So these are CFM56s, and you see on the right hand side, that's the new Neo engines. So these are just out the packet. They're a lot more efficient, but you can see the difference in the blade technology in there. And the bypass ratio. So most airliners now, it's what's called a high bypass turbofan. So most of the air doesn't actually go through the inners of the engine. It's just cold air being blown by a fan. So on the older engine, it's between 5 and 6 to 1, that ratio. Whereas on this new engine, it's 11 to 1. So hardly any of the air is actually going through the engine and out the exhaust. Most of it is just cold air that we're shifting by. And that provides us with most of our thrust. Probably best to talk about now is just a bit of the operation as and when we get going. So a bit like you do when you get to the airfield to go gliding, the first thing we'll do when we get to the aircraft is to have a look at our flight plans. And we're expected to kind of brief ourselves on what's going to be going on that day. So I've copied here a flight plan from the last flight I did, which was on the 30th of December. You can see there, just after Christmas. And whilst it all looks like a bit of gobbledygook, it basically sets out for us what we're expecting on the flight. So this is just the front page. The actual document's about 40 pages long, and that contains everything from weather, NOTAMs, the unexpected loads, everything like that, upper winds. And what would happen when I turn up is the captain would expect me to kind of have a read through that on my own and have a look at the weather. Normally we would have sort of had a look before we get in. And from there, we'll then discuss who's going to fly what sector and what fuel we'd like to take. So a rough outline of it up here is the weight and balance, essentially, the weights that we're expecting. So our DOW is a dry operating weight, payload, zero fuel, takeoff weight, etc. So we make sure that we're all within our maximum weights here. This is the rough flight information here. So that's where an alternate airport is. So you see this is coming from Tenerife back to Edinburgh. And then it will tell us our cruise level, temperatures, where the tropopause is and things like that. So it's all things that we input to the flight computer so it can work out more accurately speeds and altitudes to fly. This bit's our flight plan route. So you see the departure airfield and the runway it's expecting, and then how high we're flying. Then this is all the waypoints that we would fly to as we're going. So some of them are just direct waypoints, which is DCT, and some of them are along airways, which are being phased out now. So it's just this one, the Tango 13. And you see the distance, 1,870 odd miles. Sorry, I hit the wrong button there. And then down here's the fuel. So you see there, we're expecting 10.2 tons of fuel to come back from Tenerife there. So that's what we use. That's what we use to kind of build our awareness of the flight before we actually fly it and make any decisions. So that pack would have all of our weather and all of our NOTAMs, anything that's relevant from a technical perspective. So exactly as you would do when you get to the airfield, particularly if you're planning across country, you'll brief yourself so you've got an understanding of what you're expecting in terms of weather and serviceability of your glider. Another thing about the jet, obviously, and the difference to what Matthew does is we are working at high altitude. And I've got a screen grab here from a flight I did where we probably went a little bit too high with what we mean when we say coffin corner. So you can see that the barber's pole here, this is our maximum operating number, MMO. And then this orange line here is what we call our lowest selectable speed. So you can see that the tolerance we're operating in when we're up at 39,000 feet is an indicated airspeed of 22 knots between being too slow and, you know, not quite falling out the sky, but being slower than Airbus would like us to, and overspeeding the airplane. So it's very, very tight margins that we run to up there. And that's primarily because the thrust available to the airplane is pretty much what the thrust is that's required up there, because the air is so thin as we're going along. Also, when we're up there as well, we're in what's called RVSM airspace, which is you can fly 1,000 feet above and below other aircraft. So we've got lots of things that are mandatory for us to have in, like autopilot, TCAS, etc., that we have to have before we can get up there. The other consideration that really is important at that altitude is if we had a depressurization. So for Matthew and the Sab, I mean, I don't know, at 25,000 feet, how long would it take you to get down to sea level? Not long, I would imagine.
No, yeah.
Propellers. But as the jet's so slippery, we really do struggle to lose the altitude. And if we did have a full depressurization at 39,000 feet, your time of useful consciousness is between 15 and 20 seconds. So that's where your what we would call memory items come in. And I suppose that can be likened to a winch launch in a glider. If you have a failure, it's drilled into your memory that you put the nose down and wait for the speed. And it's the same for us. If we have a failure there, you've got 15 to 20 seconds to sort it out. So it's drilled into you that you go for your mask first. And that's where the kind of getting that discipline of memory items in is quite important. Last thing I suppose about the jet is high speed flight as well. Things happen, you know, for lack of a better word, bloody quickly at the speeds that we're moving along. I took a picture here going, I think it was Madrid that was going down. So you see we've got 609 knots ground speed there with 140 knot tailwind on the go. So you're covering 11.6 miles per minute. So just over 5 seconds, that's a mile. So you really need to keep your head ahead of the aeroplane. And that's what we mean when we say it's a management challenge. It's keeping everything, keeping your mental picture there compared to your glider putting along at 60 knots or 70 knots. Well, maybe not in Sant's case right enough, but for most of us minions, about 60, 70 knots as we go along. You've got a lot of time to think and you can see things happening. Again, you look at that in terms of the fuel that we're burning. As much as 10 tons sounds like a lot of fuel, we're burning 40 kilos of that a minute when we're up at cruise. So as much as it sounds like a lot of fuel, it very quickly starts to run out. And again, this leads on to probably the biggest similarity with gliding for a jet, which is descent or energy management. And I can't begin to tell you how many times when I've got in the simulator, the instructor's turned and said, "Oh, you're glider pilot." Oh, yeah. And they can tell because exactly what we're used to doing in gliding, we plan our flight to end up back at the airfield or 500k away or wherever we go. And we manage the energy in our airplane to do that. And the jet's exactly the same. So if we're at 39,000 feet with 500 knots of airspeed, or ground speed even, you know, that's a hell of a lot of energy we've got in the airplane, kinetic and potential. So we need to be thinking well ahead of that when we need to start our descent for the airport. What we tend to use is the 3x table, funnily enough. So I've put there, in nil wind, we need to be at least 117 miles away for starting a descent. But you've also got to factor into that the 320 takes 1 mile to lose, 1 mile to lose about 10 knots of airspeed level, and then tailwinds, and et cetera, et cetera. We've got to stay well ahead of the airplane. So it's not uncommon for us coming into Edinburgh to be starting descent, you know, over the Lake District or something like that. And I think that's the main challenge there. And where gliding really comes into it is that you're so used to managing a flight to end up where you want it, and thinking ahead of the airplane, that it really does help with the energy management and using speed to your advantage. So speeding up if we need to get down quicker, slowing up if we're getting tow, so you can fly a nice efficient approach. Luckily, being an Airbus though, we've got a computer to help us with it. So that is our flight management guidance computer there. So we can plug in all the details and it will give us a rough profile, but there's still nothing better than the pilot intervening and doing it himself. They can fly it a lot more accurate than the airplane. I think I've bored you enough with EasyJet stuff now and computers, so I'll get you back to Matty for some real flying.
Yeah, so I don't actually know why I put this one in. This is just a picture of Fair Isle as we're coming back down from Sombra. I probably should have put them a little bit earlier on. Just sort of giving you, again, a rough idea of some of the destinations and places that we fly over. Again, I think this was... not actually sure, that might actually be in the Orkneys as well. And then last one, Loch Ness, as we were leaving or coming past Inverness. I managed to grab that one. So this is the flight deck of the Saab that we fly. So you can see it looks a hell of a lot different really from Jamie and the Airbus, which probably brings us on to our biggest challenge really with it. So predominantly, if I take you through some of the instrumentation on it and stuff, we do have an autopilot. It's down here. This is the controls that we've got. So you can see, compare this and this little bit up here as well. It's a lot more basic than what they have in the Airbus. So that actually restricts us quite heavily on what we can and cannot do with the plane. And in terms of what we're allowed to do and stuff. So the biggest problem that we tend to face really is just the level of automation that we've got. So for the Saab, we are only allowed to do what's called a Cat 1 approach. So that's basically in bad weather, Jamie's plane can actually land itself. It's got rollout guidance to allow the plane to keep on the center line. So unaided, the plane will stop on the runway. We're not actually allowed to do that. We have to disconnect the autopilot before we touch down. So the actual landing minima that we're allowed to go to tends to be at an awful lot higher than some of the larger aircraft. Comparatively as well, a lot of the larger aircraft, such as the Airbus, will have like a GPS overlay. We do have GPS on the plane, but it's a lot more basic in nature and what it can do in terms of things like DME arcs. So I'll bring on to that in a minute. I'll just bring up the next page. So these are a couple of our approach charts plates for two airports. We've got Isla on the left-hand side and Kirkwall on the right. Kirkwall is kind of like a traditional ILS, really. In the sense of exactly like what you'd have at Edinburgh. So that's like an instrument approach, which will guide you down. It provides 3D guidance and you follow the cone down to land. So you can see here for us, this is our minima for landing at Kirkwall. So we need a minimum cloud base of 239 feet to allow us to, we would have to be visual by then to continue the approach. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to land. So if you've got fog, mist, it's down on the deck, there's not really much chance of us being able to get in there. So we wouldn't be able to over other airports. And the second thing that you'll be able to see is what we call an arc here. So both Kirkwall and Isla are what we call procedural. So it differs quite considerably to the larger airfields, such as Edinburgh, Glasgow, that you might ordinarily go into, where normally there they would have a radar control So they would actually vector you on and give you closing headings to intercept that ILS. Up in the islands, they don't have that radar coverage, so we're expected to do procedural flying. So what we do is an arc. So we fly so far and turn and then fly, in this case, an 11-mile arc around to intercept that ILS. And larger aircraft, you can actually get the aircraft to do that itself. We can't. We would have to use, we can use the autopilot, but we just have to use the head and bug and manually keep that distance and the radius remaining the same as we fly around. The other thing that I just touched on there was procedural services. So because they've not got the radar coverage that they do at the larger airports, just to maintain separation, it's slightly different in that they expect us to keep to a certain set of instructions before we're allowed to be given our next criteria. So it's fine if there's just the one aircraft. We're allowed to do pretty much what we like, and they'll just get us to report at various points. But if you already have one aircraft that's already started your the turn, normally they won't clear you to do the same thing until that aircraft's safely down on the ground, just to make sure that they maintain the separation. So that adds an extra level of complexity in terms of entering holds and procedural turns and whatnot, and going from there. I've also just included that slide on Isla here on the right-hand side. That's probably one of our most difficult approaches to do, which is an NDB approach. So that you're basically looking at a needle, just making sure that you've got the needle where it needs to be. And for this runway 31, there's quite a large offset for it. So there's hills and terrain off to the east. So when we join, we have to actually join offset from the runway center line. So you can see over here, there's a 22-degree offset for that approach. And if we go down one minima here, we typically for the company, we add an extra 50 feet on. So if we're not visual by 650 feet, which is still fairly low to the runway, if you become visual right on minima, you've got quite a large offset to get you in line to be able to land back on that runway. So that's typically our biggest problem that we find procedural flying. You tend to be really, really good in making sure you're on the ball with this sort of thing, and weather in terms of cloud base and wind as well. So I'll hand back over to Jamie now, and you'll run through some more bits for him.
Yeah, I mean, it actually puts a bit of a fear into me looking at these charts, because whilst we fly these approaches into Greek islands and things like that, essentially we've got a database in the aeroplane that knows exactly what the tracks are for this, and I can put it in the box, hit enter, and we just monitor it on the computer, whereas Matthew is literally hand flying these things and watching needles to make sure that he is on point. So just the mental concentration that's required to simply fly the aeroplane there takes up so much of your capacity. And I think that's the main difference really between what we do. Conversely though, a lot of the airfields we operate into are unbelievably busy. For example, London, we're usually down there 2 or 3 times a week. In the height of summer, it's so busy that you can't even check in with air traffic control. They will literally come on frequency and say, easy, 1, 2, 3. If you're on frequency, turn left head. But it's so busy. So learning to anticipate that is quite interesting. But the most difficult bit, funnily enough, is actually when you get on the ground trying to work out where you are. So this is the ground movement chart for Amsterdam Schiphol, which is one of the largest airports in Europe. And if it looks complicated, it is. We normally land on this runway here, 18 right, which is called the Polderbaan, which it's about a 10-mile taxi to the terminal building for us. And we park down on this bit here with the H hotel in here. And Amsterdam, when you land, will say to you, taxi to stand Hotel 4 via Whiskey 5. And that's all they tell you. You're expected to know the one-way system in the airport to get you to the gate. So you'll see here, there's all arrows sort of one-waying for things. Now, when you factor that into just being Amsterdam itself, that's fine if you're going there all the time. But Rome have a similar system. Madrid have a system that they have in place that no one really understands. Charles de Gaulle have a system in place that made sense in the mind of the Frenchman that created it. But we don't get the familiarity with a lot of these places to learn them off by heart. So you really are reliant, and this is where the two crew operation really comes into hand. You're really relying on the other guy to kind of, sometimes in the height of an unusual airport, to be saying, yeah, turn left here, turn right here, to keep you in the right area. And that's, again, it's all part of the challenge of being a two crew operation. You guys really have to sort of hunker down, stick together to get the thing where it needs to be. So yeah, you see there, our challenge really is the management again, and it's trying to work out very complex big airfields, with each of which have their own rules. And sometimes, for example, Amsterdam, you've maybe only got 45, 50 minutes, if you've not been there in a while, to read the aerodrome information on the charts and remember what you have to do. So yeah, it focuses the mind in that respect. The next bit we're going to go on to really is the weather, which affects both of us, but it tends to be in slightly different connotations that get us. That little short video there was taken on the way back from Paphos, flying by some big thunder cells. So whilst the weather affects both of us, it's kind of in different ways. Obviously, thunderstorms aren't massively common in Scotland, but when we start going down into Europe, particularly out towards the Adriatic, some of the cells we get are absolute monsters. 120, 130 miles wide, which means either direction you're potentially looking at 60, 70 miles to deviate round a cell, which in the daytime is terrifying enough when you can see them, but at night time, that's the first time you might see the cell like you see on the screen there, when the lightning flashes and lights up this massive cloud. So to help us around that, we've got weather radar. So this is the display we would get on the Airbus. Matthew, I guess you've got a similar thing on the Saab.
No, it's good though.
I don't know if good's the right word. But you'll see here, it basically shoots the radar beam out and it gets a return on the water in the atmosphere. So the red, basically red is bad and you don't want to go anywhere near this. But if you were tracking along towards this north, depending on what way the wind's going, I mean, this area here, you could go through, but you'd maybe want to shoot through this area here. But it's quite common sometimes to see large sort of sausage-shaped things spanning 60, 70 miles in front of you. And at night time, you can't even use just the out of the window to pick around them. So it really is, it's quite intense when you start getting down to it. And usually, to be honest with you, they tend to happen just as dinner's been brought in. So you end up having to put your lasagna down. It's freezing by the time you get back to it. And the incentive to not go near these things is fairly apparent, because that's what happens when you take an Airbus into a thundercell with hailstones. The windows are very strong, they won't break, but as you can see, neither of those guys could see anything out of that, and their weather radar packed up pretty quickly. Easyjet have had one or two where we've gone in and it's golf ball sized hail hitting the windscreen, but you really don't want to be getting anywhere near them. And it can be some long nights coming back from Paphos at 2 in the morning trying to dodge these things all the way back. And then usually when you get back to Edinburgh, there's the next one, which is all the dramatic things everybody likes, which is the crosswinds that we hit as we come in. Unlike at Portmoak, we don't have a nice grass airfield where we can land anywhere we want, and Edinburgh's notorious for any sort of wind from the south kind of start to throw us all over the shop there. Matty, you probably get even worse than the Saab, I would imagine.
So with us, yeah, I've not actually got any pictures, but our bigger ones, because we tend to be going out to the islands, the likes of Summer and Kirkwall, we really do get hit quite bad. I mean, it's not uncommon over winter to have gusting 40, 50 knot winds up there. We've got a maximum crosswind limit on the aircraft of 35 knots, which we do regularly go up to. Luckily for us, this Saab does handle really well in a crosswind. We do, it's maybe a little bit exaggerate that picture, but we do quite a strong sort of wing down into to wind and do a sort of 3-point landing on it.
Well, that was them messing it up. They weren't wind down into wind there. Yeah, and I think that's probably the big difference between, I mean, I would like to hope anyway, most of you guys, if you rocked up at Portmoak and it was gusting 45 knots and there was thunderstorms about, you'd probably go, oh, I'll go and have a coffee in the clubhouse. They still expect us to go, which is a bit rude, really. And that's where all of this, the threat and error management that's starting to come into gliding really comes in. So if the threat's the weather, then the way we manage that is by loading on extra fuel and making sure we've got an alternate that we can safely get to, really. The other big one for the weather really in Scotland is, and particularly in Edinburgh, is the fog, which Matthew said there he can do down to Cat 1 minima, which is 200 feet above the runway. We're quite spoiled on the Airbus because we can do what's called a Cat 3B approach, which is absolutely terrifying the first time you do it in anger. But basically, the airplane can land itself in fog, and it will do that with no decision height. So you're not expected to see the runway until you touch it, and 75 meters visibility. And the only reason we need that 75 meters visibility is so we can taxi off the runway once we touch down. And the airplane's very good at it, actually. And so much so that there's so much redundancy in the systems that when it gets to a certain height, that it wouldn't even tell us about an engine fire. The airplane makes a decision, actually, I've got enough redundancy here, I can continue to land. And the first time we'll know about an engine fire is when we're rolling out on the runway. It will flash up to tell us. So I've got a little video here of one of our airplanes doing a Cat 3 auto land into Milan. I don't know if you can hear the sound on the videos. I assume you can. You'll hear the pilot call 100, which is 100 feet above the ground. We don't have a decision height, so they're continuing anyway. And then you'll hear the radar counting down 50, 40, 30. So you'll see some lights in there, but have a look at the point where you think you can see the runway where you could land. Both pilots will be sitting on their hands, so to speak, here. And yeah, just get a feel for how accurate the airplane can do it. It's not very finessed. It does plant it down, but have a look at this and see what you think. That's 100 feet.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Retard, retard, retard.
Roll out. That's right.
So whilst they've seen the lights at probably about 50 feet, there was nowhere near enough peripheral there to judge a landing for yourself. That noise is the autopilot disconnecting because you've got to take the autopilot out to taxi off the runway. So you see that, I mean, the airplane is very, very good at it. It makes a fantastic job of it. And you know, before you panic about someone doing it with you on board, the redundancy is absolutely phenomenal that they have in there. So, like I say, from 200 feet, the only reason we would go around is if a little red light flashes that tells us something really that the airplane can't manage has happened. Other than that, it will fly itself. And that's big advantages of the fly-by-wire system that the Airbus have. The redundancy in there is absolutely enormous. I don't think we've got too much more. I know Matt's got a nice little video of a time lapse going on somewhere, but we've kept it relatively vague. So what I think we'll do is watch Matt's video that he's got, and then we can throw out for some questions if you want. We've got some other videos we can show you if you'd be interested or not. But if not, we can open it up for some questions. So I think the last one, Matt, you can probably.
That's it, yeah. I just thought I'd include this one, just if it's bad weather like that, we don't normally go. It's probably going to be a write-off. So I just thought I'd include this one just for a bit of fun. This is a visual approach we're doing again onto runway 15 at Sunborough. So we're on a full visual here. Sometimes we do a break off for a runway 09. So you can see there on the left-hand side, that's Fitful Head. Which if you get wind over there, it really does throw the plane around. You see there the runway for 09. And then as we start to turn, it's quite a short runway this, and it just cuts out there just before we touch down. But yeah, that's one of the good approaches with there. Just from the other side of that as well, we have similar, we don't come in over the hill. So on the right-hand side, if we're on 3-3, the opposite side, there's a little lighthouse here, and we will actually fly abeam the lighthouse. I've not got any pictures of it. Do a last-minute turn and then land facing the opposite way. So just thought I'd finish on that one.
I suppose the last bit about what Sant says is, with all the fun and excitement that you've seen us describe there, is why do we still go gliding? And I think I would agree with Sant there that you never work a day in your life. I absolutely love my job. I'm sure Matt does as well, but the flying we do there is very procedural. It's very rigid. It's very defined what we need to do. There's a checklist for everything. It's all about managing it. And frankly, passengers, when they buy their ticket, they are paying for the most boring flight of their life. They're not paying for you to be an amazing pilot and enjoy yourself and do visual approaches all the time. So gliding's the escape from that, really, isn't it? There's no radio, there's very little in the way of checklists and procedures. You can go where you want. You don't have to fly people you don't like necessarily places. It's fantastic. And again, the other thing to add in there is that the airplanes we fly have got flight data monitoring. So even if you did feel a bit mischievous and wanted to have a bit of fun, like that approach Matt did there, our flight data monitoring would light up like a Christmas tree. I'd have emails and probably be no flight by the time I got back to base if we just flew 1,500 feet up the water into Edinburgh. They're very, very strict on that, and for good reason, because things go wrong. So that's where gliding comes into. It is the absolute freedom in flying. Although the skills that it teaches you are very transferable onto this. But hopefully that's kind of explained some of the differences in what we do. If anyone's got any questions, we're quite happy to open it up to that. I don't know how I can stop the share. Is that it there? There we go. Yeah, so if anybody has questions or anything like that, I've just seen the chat popped up there. Sorry, I've hit the wrong button. Yeah, that's good.
Hope you hit the right button more often there.
There you go. I think everyone's unmuted. So yeah, just shout out if you've got any questions or anything you want to ask. Or
how do you think commercial aviation will change in the next 10 years or so?
Oh, I'm not too sure on that one, to be honest. I mean, I think there's all the insider reports seem to suggest that it's going to get back to 2019 levels pretty quickly. Looking long term, the airplanes are going to become a lot more automated. I don't think we're going to get down to one pilot operations or no pilot operations anytime soon, but the level of automation coming through now is such that the pilot is becoming more and more of a systems operator and less of a pilot to hand fly the airplane. I mean, realistically, even on the Airbus that we have now, which is a 25-year-old airplane, we could put the autopilot in at 100 feet after takeoff, and we wouldn't have to touch the controls until landing. So the tech's there to do it at suitably equipped airports. And airlines now are, I mean, Logan Air, that's why it's really the dream pilot's job. They're the exception, but airlines now really do encourage you to use the automation as much as possible. Easyjet are okay in terms of, they're pretty good for a major airline with jets, and that they do encourage you to hand fly it as much as you can, and they allow you to do that. But for example, at British Airways, so the same types of airplane, you're not allowed to take the auto thrust out. You must use that when you're flying manually, and Emirates, you must let the autopilot fly down to minima unless there's a good reason not to. So it's becoming more and more prescribed like that. So I think that will be the major changes from a pilot's perspective. The industry in general, I've no idea, to be honest. Cheaper seats and less frills probably.
But if you listen to Sully, he would tell you that not hand flying the aircraft until you're at 200 feet is a recipe for disaster. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, and we see that all the time. There's fairly.
You get people that do just like let the automatics fly it, and then they disconnect it at the last minute, and then usually because they've not really got a feel for it, the plane on balloon or start wavering off to one side. So yeah, I think it definitely does improve your coordination. That's one of the things with gliding as well that I really like, because it does keep your hand coordination really, really good. Just being able to put the thing where you want it to go and make sure it does it.
That's it. I think as well that the Airbus, I tried not to go on and drone too much about it because I know Brian and Santa put their head in their hands, but with the fly-by-wire system on it is quite peculiar, because you tell the computer what you want to do, and then the computer sort of tells you what you can have and tries to make it. So you're, particularly in windy weather, you're almost fighting the airplane, because the theory of the Airbus is with the stick you can set an attitude and the airplane will hold that and fly it for you, but it doesn't work as well as the theory of Airbus engineers say that. And we've got all different flight control laws, so if we lose certain systems, the airplane will fly completely differently to how it did beforehand and whatnot. So hand flying, it's not as nice to hand fly as the SAB will be, because you are just telling a computer what input you want to make when we're in our normal law, which if you've ever watched the documentaries about Air France, the one that stalled into the Atlantic, that's how they managed to stall it, because they had been taught through their training, you cannot stall this aeroplane. You can, as long as it's in this degraded sense of flight control law, which, you know, if you're maxed out, you might not notice it's gone into that. So it's hand flying, it's a very, very different experience to anything you've ever flown before, really.
Jamie,
You've got a question. You've got a
Matty?
question from Drew.
Oh yeah, I've just seen that
I
there.
don't want to fly Loganair or Easyjet. So if I could take Easyjet salary but fly for Loganair, I'd do that. Yeah.
See, I'd do the, if I could get to Logan Air, I would. It's much more interesting. 5 to 10 years on a beach somewhere. Well, I was starting the command process now to move into the left-hand seat. So I should have been end of last year, start of this year, be looking at a jump over to the left-hand seat, but that's all been scrapped now. So in 5 years, I'd almost certainly like to be in the left-hand seat, and 10 years, maybe doing some sort of training, and almost certainly part-time, probably.
Jamie and Matty, just as thing about hand flying, did you notice the recent report on the Rolls-Royce fan blades broke recently in America about a year ago, and the captain, who was a big sturdy man, I must say, he's a karate expert, very strong. He had to hand fly it for 40 minutes to get to Hawaii, I think it was, and that was quite exhausting. And so it was quite a difficult. It went over 45 degrees, and they had to bring it back, and then hand fly and control his engine power. And when he landed, the other pilots on board, he luckily had a trainee pilot who just qualified on that particular aircraft. So 3 of them worked together in a great team. And but the captain was asked, you could now take your hand off the controls, because he had stuck to the throttle and the hand control for 40 minutes. He just sat there with it still solid on the controls. So hand flying was really important for him.
That's it. With the Airbus, it's like the try to think of a politically correct way to say this. It's a very light touch it requires, because there's no physical link. It's a computer input. So I mean, you could move the stick with your 2 fingers like that. It's very, very light on the controls. And if the computers that control that have gone, you don't have any control. We've got a manual backup, but that's only rudders and trim. So you can get some control of the airplane, but realistically, if you can't get some of the flight control computers back, you can't land it.
We're the opposite, Logan Air. Like when we go in there, we have to go in a sim once every 6 months, and they always say day 1 in the sims, your squat day, because you really do feel it in your legs. They normally do all the engine failures and stuff. So the amount of rudder you have to keep in just to keep the thing flying straight, your legs like trembling by the end of it. But yeah. Whereas
I know that I heard a story from years ago in Easyjet. There was a crew going down somewhere, and they'd been reading the paper in the cruise, and they landed, no problems, and the captain's phone had about 10 missed calls, and it was the base captain and flight data monitoring saying, what happened? What happened with the engine failure? And he went, what engine failure? And he'd had the paper up, and the airplane had a wind down in the cruise. The autopilot ironed it out. The engine started itself again when it did a windmill start, and the crew didn't have a clue that they'd had an engine fail. So that's the capability of our automatic systems. They just iron it out. We should get them in gliders. Actually, it might make it.
That's definitely good.
What was Rod's?
Just going over Rod's one. So Rod's asking about Heil are talking about getting remote towers, basically, to try and centralize where all the air traffic control is going to be. Personally, well, it depends who you speak to. The controllers hate the idea. They want to stay where they are because they think it's going to lower work. But the bother that we have with Kirkwall and Sombra, I don't want to say too much, but I think it would be better. The number of times we get up there, because it's all procedural as well. They're talking at the minute about trying to get the Sombra radar expanded to try and take into account of Kirkwall as well. Procedure is just a nightmare for us. If they have any more than one plane up there, the whole thing grinds to a halt, and you end up getting like 4 or 5 planes in summer just sitting in the hold or having to wait out or slow down just because they can't handle it and they can't cope. In terms of the tower as well, they're sort of doing a lot of work to rule at the minute because they're working in small numbers. So the number of times the summer before last, you'd fly up there and we had planes that had been turned away like 5-10 minutes before landing because they basically just shut up shop. They weren't prepared to sort of extend into like 5 minutes or so, which you never really get at one of the large scale airports like Edinburgh. So they're hoping if they do bring that on, that they'll be able to sort of improve that service and try and get it more 24 hours service.
I think they do it in London City already. It's a remote tower.
So a lot of the controllers at the minute, if you speak to them about it, they're sort of saying that they're worried that the actual quality of it won't be too good, and if it goes down for whatever reason, there's going to be problems. But to be honest, reliability from City, they don't really have any problems. So. Yeah.
It doesn't make much odds to us, really. It's just a voice on the other side of the radio, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, so they're
and actually a lot in Europe now. We've I don't know if I had a picture of the cockpit up there, but there's little screens down the bottom. We've got this new system called CPDLC, which is Controller Pilot Data Link Communications. So when we're up in the cruise now, we can send essentially a text message to air traffic control, and they can send us one back. So we don't have to talk to anyone. So it's great if you're antisocial or you can't be bothered speaking to people. I can literally send a text message to Maastricht Control asking them for a climb to 390 to avoid weather. It will ping down, and 30 seconds later I'll get a message back saying, yes, that's fine, or no, stay here, or I can offer you it in a few minutes. So it really is. It's getting quite impressive, the level of tech that they're bringing into here. I would say they've had it in America for about 5 years, but it's starting to get modern for Europe now, which is quite nice.
Hi, Jamie and Matty. Would you be able to go a little bit more into your training? I know you said that you went over to Florida yourself, Jamie, to do your PPL, but would you be able to go in a bit more detail on both your training paths?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I left school and went and worked in Mackie D's in the kitchen for about 9 months and saved up to go to. There was a school back in the day called Ormond Beach Aviation, which was famous, or infamous is probably the better word, because about every other week one of their airplanes ended up on one of the freeways over there. But that was about £3,500 back in 2010, it would have been, for a PPL there, and it was a JAA PPL. From there, the next step is to hour build. So I was sort of flying at various different schools, and I had a job down south at the time. But when I came back to Edinburgh and joined Easyjet, that was when I started to get a bit more serious with it after a couple of years of not being very productive. And I got a share in a small Cessna, an insurance share in a small Cessna 172, which is out at Kirknewton, which is near Edinburgh. And I did most of my hour building in that and flying the tug at Portmoak. And whilst I was doing that, we were studying for the ATPL exams, which you could do distance learning. That was with Bristol Ground School. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship with them for their 20th anniversary, so that was all paid for. So the 14 exams all done. This was whilst I was cabin crew for Easyjet, annoying Brian with questions every time I was flying with him. And then from there I went out to a school who are still running actually in Hungary called Cavalcade Aviation. And it's run by, there's 3 or 4 Wizz Air training captains on the school. And back when EASA was a thing, and well, I suppose it still is a thing, but back when you could go and do your training elsewhere, I went over there and did a CPL MEIR, which was fantastic because over there you're classed as a student. Same with all of Europe really, you're classed as a student, so you don't pay any VAT on your training, which keeps the cost down a lot. And I did the cheapest way to do it is to actually do a single engine instrument rating, which you do all on a Cessna 152 or something like that. You then do your commercial pilot's license, which is on a Cessna Cardinal 177. From there, you then do a multi-engine rating and then just an MEIR upgrade, which is only 6 hours of flying. So it keeps the multi-engine time lower. You end up with exactly the same license, but instead of doing all of your instrument rating on a multi-engine airplane at £500 an hour, you do most of it on a Cessna 150 at 100 and whatever an hour. Well, it was cheaper out there. And back then, you could actually get a Hungarian examiner to test you to a UK standard, and then apply for a license to the UK CAA. So you come out with a shiny British frozen ATPL for a fraction of the cost. And that cost me, to get from 0 to that stage, cost me about £25,000. And from there, I applied internally to Easyjet, and they were very kind enough to pay for my type rating on the Airbus, which is normally, with base training, about £35,000, but it didn't cost me anything, luckily, and they threw in a JOC MCC course. So that's kind of the route I took. Matty was fairly similar.
Yeah, I did all my flying out of the UK. I did shop around quite a lot. So initially I did my PPL just at a local school down in Newcastle, and then did most of my hour building then. I then went down to Oxford and did the written exams down there, but I hated it down there. I just didn't really link in with the school, so I ended up coming back to my original school.
Oh, you did yours.
Did my commercial and my multi-engine rating at Newcastle. That school went bust, so I ended up moving up to ACS, just up the road at Perth. I did that there, went to Simtech out in Dublin, got the MCC JOC, and then came back to the UK. So I think all in, mine was about 50,000 I paid for it. And then, yeah, I just kept flying. At the time I was working for Jet2 as cabin crew. So I stayed on with them, kept flying just to put myself through the training. And then luckily I was able to find a job flying on an AOC out of Durham, doing like pleasure flights and things. So we were sort of taking, it was just a little warrior, taking people up for pleasure flights. And then obviously started flying tail dragger, and kept moved up here, started there. So yeah, the big thing I would say if you were looking at it is just check out the school, like see where you want to go, and actually like go around. Loads of them hold like open days and things. Even if it's not on, just ring up. Usually there'll be someone there that can show you around, speak to the instructors, speak to other students, and see sort of what kind of school sort of works for you.
The other thing that I'd say is, as you've probably seen from just our descriptions, the amount of flying schools that go bust, no matter how much of a discount they offer you, don't pay it up front. And if you are going to pay it up front, pay it on one of these, because at least you can get it back, and you get air miles as well if you do it on one of these. But yeah, don't part the money up front. I mean, I've been at 3 flying schools that have gone bust. One in the States, 2 in Scotland. So it's a fairly common thing. So try to part with as little money as you can up front. And the other choice you have to make is, I would never ever advocate doing the integrated stuff, because I don't think it teaches you to be a particularly good pilot in terms of it's a bit too structured, so you don't get the chance to go out and make the mistakes and scare yourself. But the connections with the airlines and things, if you've got the money to pay it and you just want the end goal of an airline job, dare I say it, it's probably better. But you'll certainly have a lot more fun and have a lot more money in your pocket if you do the modular route, and you're not expending as much immediately, so you can work as you do it. But that's kind of how my view on it is. I don't know if Brian's probably had more experience with the integrated guys and the MPL guys than I have ever seen, but I suspect you don't get as much exposure doing it that way.
Jamie, it might be interesting to compare what the training was like when I did it back in the
that would be great, yeah,
compared with what you do now.
Yeah, that'd be excellent.
I started off flying gliders back in the 70s. Did a PPL, which you could actually do in 3 hours if you had a Silver C. So that's changed a lot. So I think I had about 7 hours in total to get PPL, started flying the tug. And eventually I decided to go commercial in the 80s, late 80s. And I spent the season towing gliders at Port Moat, did 600 hours in 6 months. And I think I did 70 in a day. That was my, I doubt that'll ever be done again, 70 air tows in a day. I did a correspondence course, used to take my notes out and study between tows. And in those days, if you had 700 hours, you were exempt from a full-time course. So all you had to do was a correspondence course for the ATPL exams, pass the GFTs, which I did with Di Heather Hayes out of Dundee, and then the instrument rating. So the whole thing cost me under £5,000. It's just amazing compared with nowadays. But it's been quite interesting to listen to the pair of you, because I worked for Logan Air right at the start of my career and ended up in Easyjet. And there's no doubt the flying in Logan Air is so much more fun. And interesting seeing an ILS on to 09 at Kirkwall when I used to go up there in the shorts, because we used to do an early Belfast back to Edinburgh up to Wick, then Wick to Kirkwall, have lunch and back. And there was no instrument approach on to 09. So if it was bad weather, low cloud base, we just went up Scapa Flow at low level until you got to the oil slick from the Royal Oak and VFR, and turned right and you're lined up the runway. It worked really well. But the flying was a lot more fun in the Logan Air days than it's EasyJet. It's very restricted.
It is, and I think that's the sad thing, really. I mean, it's I would love to have gone and done what Matty and Brian done, but you just in the current day and age, you can't turn down the job when you're offered it. And EasyJet, yeah, okay, you can hand fly visual approaches and things like that, but it's very much a procedural setup. I mean, I've got probably, in fact, I can show you here, probably one of the approaches that we actually get to do properly is Nice, which we'll try and find a video of here. Where are we? So I don't know if this will work. Screen share. Can I do that? There you go. Is that working? Sombra, really low level turning in type. And this, believe it or not, an EasyJet would be classed as a bit extreme. It's a bit out there. You'll have guys sweating at the thought of having to do this because, and you see, it's so benign, really. As and when you get to, I don't know if I can speed it up a bit. I don't really want to see all the crap in the. Can I playback speed? There you go. A good double speed. There you go. But you can see how benign the airplane is really to fly. It literally just sits there. This would be classed as a bit difficult and a bit extreme, let's say, an EasyJet versus Logan Air flying along at 500 feet up Scapa Flow or something like that. I'm going to embarrass myself here because from memory I absolutely smash it into the runway on this one as well, so get a big chuckle there. But you see how far away from it. We're still at 1,000 feet when we're turning level there. So it's all so sort of sterilized, really. Because back in the day, you could fly into 500 feet there, but EasyJet would tell you off that because they have what's called the stable approach criteria. So by 1,000 feet, we have to be 30 knots or within of our approach speed. We've got to have everything configured and pretty much be ready to land. So it takes a lot of the fun out of it, really. Not that I'm trying to dissuade you; it's still great fun. And then it even calls you a retard at the end, just to remind you. But that's about as good, really, as it would get an EasyJet from a flying sense and a view, which when you see compared to Logan Air, it's just it's a different animal, really. How about Madeira? Madeira's good, but it's captains only, and it's what's called a Cat C airport. So you have to have specific training to go down there. And to be honest, I've been to Madeira maybe 3 or 4 times, and every time I've went, it was clear blue skies and absolutely lovely. So it was a pretty bog standard. It's only difficult because of the winds when you get there and the wind shear as you get down. A bit lower, but on a normal day, it's lovely. It's just like it's a runway. You just put it down there. All the time, dedication, money involved in getting to where you are. Is it worth it? Would you do it again?
Yeah, hands down. Yeah. So the minute I'm going through redundancy, potentially. So I'm in the at-risk group at Edinburgh.
There's a collection afterwards.
So yeah, like the thought of that just boggles us, thinking like, what else would I do? What else would I want to do? I just hate the idea of just sitting in an office. As I say, like every day is different, completely different. We fly to different places, albeit not as many destinations as EasyJet, but it's great. Yeah, fly to different crews each day. It's no 2 days the same.
Yeah, and I guess I suppose I'm slightly different from Brian in that I've not really known anything else though. My comparison really is only with like airplane flying and gliding. Well, so if you said to me, would you rather be in the Airbus or in a light airplane flying up to Oban or something, I'd obviously rather do going up to Oban. But it beats working for a living. I mean, usually the most difficult part of my day is deciding which one of the crew meals I want to eat or something like that. It's not it's when everything's going right, it is a very, very enjoyable job for the most part. You sit and look out the window, and then if you can bid for the right duties, you can get 2 takeoffs and landings a day, which is quite nice. I mean, I guess I'm pretty similar to Brian here. I'm going to Paphos and Tenerife doesn't really do it for me. I'd far rather do 4 or 5 sectors because it's more interesting up and down, and you actually get to fly the plane. But sitting for 5 hours going to Paphos or Tel Aviv or something like that, it's not my thing. But we can bid for those. So, but yeah, to answer the question, yeah, I would do it again. I would certainly do it again. And even despite all the things, the salaries are pretty good. We can't argue with that. It's not too bad. So, yeah, don't hang up the dream if you want to do it. If you do want to do it, then push on. They've actually just opened up an A320 fixed base. It's a full sim. It just doesn't move in Glasgow, which they will be. You can go in for £100 for an hour and have a play around. So if you want to see what it's like, book one of them and go and have a shot in it. If anybody wants, I'll jump in it with them and sort of show them how it's done. Or Brian, I'm sure could jump in and show them how it's done properly. And go and have a go at it and see what it's like. But it is great, and I think the other way of looking at it is it doesn't matter how long you've done it. There's still something slightly giddy about having £60,000 of thrust in your left hand as you open the taps on it. It's great fun. It's just nice to fly something a bit bigger and with a bit more energy and whatnot. And like Sam said, it beats working for a living. So. Where's the puppy?
Sorry.
don't get the puppy. Is that what you want? So we could have saved ourselves an hour of talking.
I just got talking. Yeah.
I've got a gliding question, if you guys don't mind.
Go for it. Yeah.
I'm wondering, with all the safety management stuff and procedures and whatnot that you guys have, what of all of that could be applied to gliding to make gliding a safer sport? Yes, more dogs in the cockpit I think would help. I agree.
Yeah. What would you have safety management stuff bringing in? I think the biggest thing is just reporting. So with the powered stuff, with us anyway, the biggest thing, like how we learn as much from it, is making sure that we're reporting. It's really drilled into you, especially from the FDF. I think that's more for us. Like, you always do it because you're being watched at work. Well, you do it anyway, but like, yeah, the sort of big push is making sure that everything gets reported back, and you're never really punished for reporting, but you're always punished if you deliberately try and hide something. So yeah, I'd say that, because we do often get like a safety report once every month out, and things get fed back. So our procedures do change quite regularly. They'll introduce or tweak things depending on what's came back in from the safety report. So with us, for example, we've recently had something about the rejections on the runway for like power settings. If we do like effectively like a D rate. So one of the changes that's recently came out is if you do if you do have a D-rate, they've got to you set a higher power setting or higher than what you would have in the past, just to try and reduce those rejections.
Yeah, I think that's. I must admit, it's one of the things I find quite interesting is when you read some of these safety reports of what's happening, you go, how the hell did they do that? That just seems. And I find it quite interesting, sort of analysing where they've gone wrong. And usually when they bring a procedure in, it's because of something like that. So we had one in Easyjet where they were pushing an airplane back in Amsterdam, and down on the pedestal we've got a switch that lets us start the engines, the mode selector, and you twist it that direction. And about 6 inches below it is the handbrake, the parking brake. And the pilot set the parking brake as the tug was pushing him back, and the nose wheel went through the cab of the tug and nearly killed the tug driver. And I found it's quite interesting how they do it. What they said is the guy was going for that switch, and because it's just an action that you do, like we would do in a glider, especially if you're on a different type, you might go to move the trimmer or go to move the air brakes there, and it's actually the gear or something like that, and you see people doing a nice half landing gear approach. It's the action slip and the muscle memory. So we now have to point out when we do engine mode selector, we have to point to it and say it, and the other guy looks at it. So I think there's probably things like that. I find it's the sort of human factors that cause these accidents or incidents that I think would be quite handy to bring in particular for club airplanes and things like that. For a DI, having I wouldn't say a checklist to do that, but we were discussing it the other day at the startup group, having something for the differences, because I never fly a junior. I couldn't tell you the last time I flew a junior, and if I had to DI one, other than looking to see if the wings were still attached and the wheels inflated, I wouldn't have a lot to add on that. So the intricacies and different faults or maybe ADs that have come up on it, it would be handy to have something like that on a laminated car. So things like that we have in the airlines could maybe come into gliding to add to safety in that sense, I would imagine. Anything else for anyone else?
Can I just ask a question, Jamie?
Yeah, of course you can.
Actually, that point you just made, we're actually doing something, Max and I are working on something along those lines.
Excellent.
So it might be quite interesting to talk to you about that, if that's okay.
That's it. I mean, let's say it's only for, I think everyone should have a basic understanding of a DI and whatnot. I wouldn't want to go full airlines if that's mine in there. I mean, we have. Here's one I stole earlier from the airplane. I mean, this is our QRH book, our quick reference handbook, which is all of our abnormal stuff. So I don't think it needs to be as prescriptive as that, into the real nitty gritty, but just the major big picture things that you're liable to miss, I think would be quite handy for that. Especially given our record at the moment, it's probably quite a useful thing to get in there.
Yeah, it's because going around with Max at the weekend, he was going around a junior with Lindsay and myself and pointing out lots of little things that I didn't know about that had gone wrong in the past. And I guess is that what you're talking about in that document? It's sort of things that have been missed in pre-flights, that kind of thing.
Well, it's not so much that, because our engineers do the pre-flight, but it's just more the mantra of, if something's different or changing, or there's a slight variation, that's the sort of thing that's usually missed. So we have our fan cowls on the airplanes, or if they're missed, the fan cowls come off on board, and that became a hot topic because you don't think to normally check it because you've got to get down on your hands and knees and look under it. So having that memoir there to say that you need to check this, guys, or it gets embarrassing is quite good. And I must say as well, I'm the absolute last person that wants Port Moat to be run like an airline, because it just isn't. You can't do that, and it would sap all the fun out of it. But certain things could perhaps be useful. But I wouldn't want to have everybody have to come in stripes and report at a certain time and all that. That's not what flying's about, for especially gliding. But yeah, hopefully something like that could potentially, because we're all human, we'll forget things.
But yeah, it's getting the balance, keeping the fun, obviously. Yeah.
Exactly.
Point taken.
Exactly. But there we go. Has anybody else got any questions or anything you want to know for Matty or me, or just in general, or you want to chat about anything? Or...
Well, actually, I've got a question for Matty.
Go on then.
Matty, did you start, or did you go straight onto the turboprop, or did you have any time on the Islanders?
No, so Islanders for us, that's all single pilot. So it's only the experienced guys that tend to go on that. That's all done pretty much completely visually. They just go off and do their own thing. And because they still try and fly them where possible when they can, it does sort of, they require a little bit more experience before you go on there. So usually it tends to be sort of like the more older captains that if they're retiring and stuff, if they're wanting sort of a bit different, they'll sort of head off up to there and just base themselves up there. So no, yeah, I came straight online on the Saab and yeah, been on there since.
So hopefully the ATR soon.
Yeah,
Fingers crossed. Things pick up. Should be nice.
I think that's really good. I think that's excellent. Can you hear us?
Yeah, we got you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll finish at that point, and I think that was excellent. And I think one of the points that I made earlier is that I mean, I used to work in the Antarctic, and I used to read about all the heroes in what they call the heroic age, and it doesn't matter what. And we look at, things like Ernest Gann, or read books like, Fate is the Hunter and all the rest of it. And the thing I really do feel is that, the people that are involved in aviation are the same, and all that's happened is the environment's become more sophisticated and changed. And I think that definitely applies to you too. And a big thanks for putting all that together. And I think that's great.
No, not
thanks very much.
Anytime. I'll put in the WhatsApp and the chat and email and WhatsApp. If anyone has questions they don't want to ask here, or they want any other stuff, that you're more than welcome to send them through. But yeah, hopefully we'll see you all up at Portmoak again soon for some proper flying. And hopefully I'll be busy enough that I don't have time to come to Portmoak for some proper flying when the next roster comes out. But no, thanks for facilitating all the talks as well, Sam. They've been great all year.
No sweat. It's a pleasure. Pleasure to listen to chaps like yourselves. Good stuff.
That's it.
Excellent.
Great.